The Democrats are so cocky, they just threatened the United States Supreme Court to rule the way that they want them to rule on an upcoming Second Amendment case. Stick by and listen to this. Hey everybody, welcome back to Guns and Gadgets. I am your host, Jared, and I am here today to bring you some unprecedented news, some unprecedented cockiness, to the point of being a pompous ass. That's right. 5 senators, one of which is running for president right now, 5 Democrats, have threatened the United States Supreme Court Monday, just 2 days ago, that if they did not back out of a Second Amendment case that they've decided to take up from New York, and we'll go over the case in a second. I've talked about it a couple times. But if they didn't back out of this case, if they didn't dismiss it, then they threatened to restructure the court, and it would have devastating effects on the way it is currently made up. That's right. A bunch of liberals have threatened the U.S. Supreme Court that if they don't rule in the liberal way, they will do all they can to set it up as a liberal court. So, checks and balances, right? There are 3 branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. So these people, these liberals, are so out of their mind, so worried that this Second Amendment case is going to be ruled in the proper way, restoring rights to Americans in New York and thus nationwide when it comes to the Second Amendment and their right to carry. They're so worried about this case that they're threatening that they can overcome a different branch of government and ruin it so that they can get the results they want. So now the Democrats want to be able to write law, they want to be able to enforce the law the way they see fit, and now they want to interpret it the way they want. Ladies and gentlemen, if it doesn't get any more freaking tyrannical, I don't know what is. Democrats, if you carry through with this threat, you're looking at the second revolution. But I will continue with what's going on. So Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, I'm going to be reading from some notes here I have because I don't want to get this wrong. Okay, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who's a pompous Democrat senator from Rhode Island. He filed an amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday. Now, this Senator Whitehouse, was also joined with 4 other pompous asses that think they're so supreme, so superior, that they're going to be able to just tell the U.S. Supreme Court how to operate. And those bobos are none other than Senator Richard Blumenthal, the anti-gun clown out of Connecticut, who's also hand-in-hand with Senator Lindsey Graham right now trying to write the nation's red flag bill that President Trump is asking and begging for, and that Ivanka Trump is begging for as well. Also, Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, Democrat, and Senator Richard Durbin from Illinois, Democrat, and the presidential candidate Kristen Gillibrand from New York, all Democrat wackos, all anti-gun people, and they're literally trying to put a figurative gun to the U.S. Supreme Court's head, saying if you rule for our peasants and their right to carry, we're going to pull this figurative trigger and ruin the Supreme Court. Pretty frickin' ballsy. Now, the court that they're demanding the U.S. Supreme Court back out of is addressing one of the most restrictive Second Amendment infringements anywhere in the nation. We're talking about New York City. Now, before I jump into the case, I want you to know that these dopes, these senators, have also told the Supreme Court that if you rule with the Second Amendment, and should the Democrats win in 2020, your gig is up. Basically, that's exactly what they're saying. Now, I want to read some of the quotes that they have in this brief because it is telling, and it just shows how pompous they are. They warn that, quote, a growing majority of Americans believe this court, referring to the U.S. Supreme Court, is motivated mainly by politics. And they're accusing the justices of issuing rulings through, quote, bare partisan majorities, end quote. Gee, that's how every vote goes through Congress, is right down the party line. That's why they flip their lid when Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, they try to destroy these gentlemen's lives through the confirmation process in the Senate. The threats continued in this brief, and it says, that the court either, quote, heal itself, end quote, or be, quote, restructured. Now, I already referred to the two justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and each one of these five were fierce opponents of their appointments. Each one of these senators have also, basically through their whole career, gained success in their party by opposing the Second Amendment, their whole career. And the case they're worried about is probably going to be the case that if the ruling comes down the way it looks, and that can change at a blink of an eye, this could be another landmark case to the like of McDonald and to the like of Heller. Well, this case is out of New York City, and it has to do with the New York City law that states if you have a permit for your pistol, which is a daunting task to get in and of itself, then you're only allowed to have it at your primary residence or to bring it to a governmental approved, NYPD approved shooting range. And you can't bring it anywhere else. You can't bring it out of state for a shooting match. You can't bring it to a second home you might have, say in upstate New York. You can't bring it anywhere. So they're telling you that, yeah, you have the Second Amendment, but you're going to keep it in your friggin' house, bum, and you're not going to take it out anywhere. Otherwise, you're a felon. That includes even if it's unloaded and locked in your trunk, which federal law says is the way it should be done if you're going to transport or go from one state to another. So the question in this case, and for those interested, the case is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the City of New York, number 18-280. It's in the Supreme Court right now. But the question of this case, the main reason these anti-gunners are losing their mind, is this case will determine if the Second Amendment right, the constitutional right, number 2, shall not be infringed, a civil right, extends outside of one's home like every other right, or is it just relegated to your home? Now you can see why they fiercely want this case to be ruled in their favor, these liberal crackpots, because if the Supreme Court caves under the pressure and does what these liberal whack jobs want, you're going to see every single state jump on this because, hey, it's a federal ruling, we have to follow this. You can't take your guns out of your home. Now the flip is that if they rule the way that I believe they should, the way that the Constitution says they should, and that's their job, is to interpret law that it follows the Constitution, this will kill the New York City restrictions, and thus many others that are similar to that one across the country. Now you're saying they threatened the Supreme Court that they can fundamentally change or restructure the court. How can they do that? They can't do that. Well, there actually is a way. The last time it was tried was in the 1930s by FDR during the New Deal times. And the Supreme Court struck down some parts of his New Deal in 3 different years, actually. And what he did was he threatened to add more seats to the Supreme Court and to nominate his ultra-liberal justices to break the swing or kill the tide, or to basically to stack it in his favor. Now you have to remember that Congress sets the amount of seats in every federal court to include the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has had 9 justices since the 1800s. FDR, way back when, threatened to add 6 seats to bring the total to 15, which would give him a huge stranglehold on the Supreme Court, because the judge is going to say, hey, this president nominated me, I kind of got to vote their way, which is the way every Supreme Court justice has been every year. It was okay in the Obama years when they were refusing to take up Second Amendment cases, right? The Democrats didn't chirp then. Now, I've done a couple of videos on this court case. They announced, the Supreme Court announced they would take it up the week that SHOT Show hit. And if you remember, I got in my little hotel room, did a video there, and I told everybody that the Supreme Court had issued a writ of certiorari, which means they're going to take up the case. Now, since then, New York said, holy cow, the Supreme Court took this up. We're really in trouble. So they changed their restrictions, saying, you know what, SCOTUS, we got this. We'll take care of it. And you don't have to worry about it anymore, because those conditions, they don't exist anymore, Wink, wink, nod, nod, like, you dropped the case, and we promise we're not going to do that anymore. Well, luckily the Supreme Court saw through that, and said that the case will continue, it will go forward. And of course, you all know the second that if which they still could, if the Supreme Court decides to dismiss the case, which they still could, then you know New York is just going to go right back to the way they were and put the thumb on their little people, their little peasants, their peons, and crush them like grapes, because that's what tyrants do. Now keep in mind, October, next month, it's almost September, month and a half, but October is when they're going to hear the oral arguments in this case. Now, they also can, at any time between now and then, grant or deny the motion to dismiss the case. They could still dismiss this. Keep your eyes and ears peeled, ladies and gentlemen. This case has the left pooping their pants. They're losing their minds. That tells you all you need to know. If they're willing to threaten the makeup of the court itself because they're going to be exposed, they're not going to be able to control their people the way they want, they can't just take over and take the guns, things are going to go crazy if the Supreme Court sides either way. If they side with New York, every state, every major city is going to start doing this. You can't take your gun out of your home. Supreme Court said so, pal. And if the Supreme Court goes with the Second Amendment, their gun control and the basis of it is going to crumble from the foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy the Second Amendment news as fast as it happens reported to you in a straight, no-nonsense matter, no CNN-type fluff, straightforward, that's how I do it here on Guns and Gadgets, and I ask you to please consider joining this growing community. 102,000 people have subscribed, and I need you to subscribe too so that you can stay in the loop. Also hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified, hopefully, when I put out new content. And until we see each other again, this is JR from Guns and Gadgets. Be safe, stay vigilant, and carry a weapon. Take care, everybody.